All right. Hey, everybody. This is Sumoy Tovez from MotoUP Inc. And I have the pleasure of linking up with the Road Racing World Action Fund, John Ulrich, and also Kyle Wyman, who is a participant with the soft air barriers. We're supporting their promotion of motorcycle racing safety, particularly in utilizing these soft air barriers at motorcycle racing events around the United States. So MotoUP is a 501c3 charity incubator that offers a premier elevated experience during the Red Bull Grand Prix of Americas in Austin, Texas, with a purpose. And so we will be showcasing our suite event on April 8th through the 10th for MotoGP weekend. And what the suite weekend allows us as a military veteran, I'm a military veteran, but it allows military veterans, motorcycle racing enthusiasts, and technologists to come together to give back to the veteran community. And all of the proceeds that are raised during this weekend are given to one veteran nonprofit organization that works to assist in the rehabilitation of combat wounded veterans through motorsports. And so we have raised over $53,000 to date over the last two events. This year's 2022 beneficiary is Motorcycle Missions. One of the really cool things that we were able to do last year was give back also to the Road Racing World Action Fund. So I've got John Ulrich, and I really want to go ahead and give us a little bit about the Road Racing World Action Fund and what you guys are doing.
Well, it all dates back to when I first got into racing. You were lucky if there were hay bales stacked in front of hard things that you would hit if you crashed. And we had a situation where we'd go to a race, we'd say something like, hey, can we get some hay bales stacked in front of this bridge abutment so if we crash here, we don't die? Yeah. And the typical answer that we would get from race organizers and racetrack operators was, if you don't find this track suitable as it is to race on, leave and don't come back. But they were a lot less polite in how they put that message. So over the years, I tried different ways to get talk to tracks and try to get them to increase runoff area and put in gravel traps and put up hay bales and et cetera. And it was not really successful. Finally, I kind of had it, and I looked around, and it wasn't just me and my friends racing. It was me and my kid and my friends and their kids racing. And I wanted to make it better. And there was a company in Australia that came up with a product called Air Fence. It was basically a pre-inflated airbag. So it had an ambient air chamber and had blow-off valves in the top. And when somebody flew into it, the air in the ambient air chamber was pushed through the blow-off valves at a controlled rate and absorbed the energy. So that was the basic concept. So I did an editorial on roadracingworld.com, which is my website, works with my magazine, Road Racing World Motorcycle Technology. And I said, hey, I'm buying a section of this. Who's with me? And the response was overwhelming. We raised $100,000 in a couple of days, and the people who were running the national racing series at the time put out a press release saying, "Oh, it takes 4 months to get this stuff. It's impossible to get it before the end of the season. And oh, by the way, we have a plan to deploy it. We're just not ready to do it yet. It can't be done." Well, 5 weeks after we started this thing, we had 20 sections, basically 30 feet long sections, deployed at Road Atlanta. And 2 weeks after that, we had another 15 deployed at Road America for a total of 35. So in 7 weeks, we did what they said couldn't be done in 4 weeks. And it was due to the response that we got from people, just, regular people sending in money, racers, family members of racers, companies that were involved in racing, motorcycle companies, and it took off from there. So, and at first, we got a lot of pushback. The people running the races didn't want to deploy it. They didn't want to deploy enough of it. They thought it was a pain in the ass. And then we were at a track, Sonoma, now known as Sonoma Raceway. And there was a AMA national race going on. And a guy named Aaron Yates crashed in a super sport race. And he crashed in a corner that had an Armco barrier outside of it, probably 15 feet off the racing surface. And it had a section of air fence deployed there. And he crashed, and he slid backwards on his back with his head up into this soft barrier. If the soft barrier wasn't there, he was in a prime, his situation was absolutely perfect for breaking his neck. His neck was forward. He was going to hit with the back of his head. And so everybody, and this is on live TV. So everybody kind of holds their breath. He slides into the stuff, disappears into the air fence, and gets up, crawls out, and walks back to the pit. And that's when people really got it. That's when they understood what this stuff could do. So that was a big turning point for us. And so since that time, people, it's a lot easier to get people to deploy air fence now. They buy into it. Racetracks and race promoters have figured out that it's not good business to kill your stars or maim them or hurt them or anything like that. And you can't make motorcycle racing of any type perfectly safe. But this stuff is really, really good. And so since we started about 20 years ago, we're coming up on $3 million worth, and we've blanketed racetracks. It's a beautiful thing. I think Kyle can talk about what it's like to fly into a section of air fence at a high rate of speed. What happened?
Yeah, I actually have had two that really stand out. The first one being in October of 2009 at Daytona. Turn 6 there doesn't have a lot of runoff. I'd run off in the dog leg and hit a kind of a drainage swale out in the grass and re-entered the track. And I'd actually bent my front rotor, didn't know it at the time, but went for the brakes into turn 6 and had none. I T-boned a rider and we both tumbled into the air fence, and I broke my leg at that point. That was a pretty big one. I was in the hospital in Orlando for 3 weeks, but the impact of hitting the rider was far worse than hitting the wall, which was pretty significant. And then in 2017 at the season finale at Barber Motorsports Park, I had another completely surprise brake failure on the front straightaway. And this was 3 or 4 laps into the Saturday morning practice. So 161 miles per hour with no brakes going into turn 1. I jumped off the bike at about 130 miles per hour and tumbled. And when I hit the air fence, my body was still traveling at 104. I actually fractured my T6 vertebrae in that crash, and it still hurt, as you can imagine. But, if I was hitting a solid, Armco or concrete at 104 miles per hour, it would have been a lot different. So, in the depth of that air fence section that I hit, my deceleration from 104 to 0, took place over, 4 feet instead of over, 0 feet. And that was the difference. So, obviously, I think I'm standing here today largely due to that. Safety's come a long way in this sport. I had an airbag suit as well, but man, that impact was huge. It's changed my body for the rest of my life, but I'm here to talk about it. So
exactly.
Yeah, and about a couple of seconds after you hit, your mom texted me, "Thank you. You're welcome."
Yeah, that's crazy. So it's, we're talking safety first. And so can you give us a little bit of more of the intricacies on how the air fence actually works once you have them deployed?
Well, it works like an airbag. So instead of having a car airbag be inflated by explosive charge and then you slam into it and it blows the air out and it absorbs energy, it's pre-inflated. So and when you hit, it pushes the air out of the air fence through these blow-off valves that I mentioned earlier, and that absorbs energy. So it's a real simple concept, but it works really, really well. Or there's 2 ways that we've worked to deploy it. Okay, all of them are partnerships with racetracks or racing organizations or track day organizations, et cetera. So if you go to a Moto America race, or if you go to the race at COTA this week from now, you'll see sections of this inflatable air fence deployed in places where the runoff room isn't sufficient for the speeds the bikes are going. And we basically supply the sections to Moto America. They haul them around and they deploy them. When they get damaged, they have some guys that work on fixing them. There's a certain amount of attrition that goes on when you've got a national series going about 10 races a year. and the stuff is deployed at all those tracks, you're going to have situations like Kyle's where the air fence that his bike hit was in worse shape than he was. Sometimes they can be fixed, sometimes they can be replaced. So we also work with different track day organizations that have fundraisers at specific racetracks. For example, Blackhawk Farms in Illinois. That was a track that I raced there in the 80s, and it was completely surrounded by big trees. So in addition to barriers. So if you ran off the track or crashed and slid off the track or flew off the track, whatever you did, you had a good chance of hitting a tree or an Armco barrier. So some track day guys got together and started having annual barbecues, and they'd raise money with the barbecue. They'd send it into the Road Racing World Action Fund, and we typically send them more air fence than they raise the money for, because a lot of people don't make donations saying this needs to go here or this needs to go there. So over the years, people have gone to the barbecue, donated, they come back to the track, they see air fence. They come back next year, they see more air fence. Come back next year, they see more air fence. So it's like a snowball going downhill, and people get more and more enthused about it. Hey, I went to the barbecue. I spent $20. Look at this. So that's a model that we've emulated with a lot of organizations around the country, where they do local fundraising. We help them get their fence in place, and it's basically at the root of it, it's an educational thing. Because what we've done, the best thing that we've done is we've changed the culture. We've changed the culture from, if you want a hay bales, or if you want air fence, or if you don't think this track is safe enough, you shouldn't be racing. You're not a man. You're not tough enough. So that's all disappeared. And we heard everything when we started this thing. We heard guys saying that, these guys are just scared of racing. No, we're not scared of racing. We just don't think that making a typical human error should result in being killed or maimed if it can be avoided. It's the same reason people wear helmets, okay? Or in Kyle's case, the airbag vest that he had on also, which had GPS in it, which is why he knows that when he body slammed the section of Road Racing World Action Fund that he hit at Barber, he was going 104 miles an hour. And basically 4 feet later, he was going 0, and he was able to get up and stagger out of the gravel trap. So that's a tremendous outcome. And I should mention that when I started racing, it was very typical for several guys to get killed every year. And some of them were club racers and some of them were national guys. And it was like expected. It was part of the deal. So we've changed the culture. That's the best part of this deal. Now people understand what it's all about. Our educational mission has made great strides, and we're continuing to raise money and help get soft barriers deployed wherever we can.
So Kyle, have you ridden some of the other tracks that don't have the soft air barriers deployed? And how is your feeling as far as that goes, if that actually occurs, as far as, your capacity and how you ride?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, when you go to a Moto America event and you go and ride your bicycle on Thursday setup day, and you ride around and you can see all the air fences already deployed, it gives you a good feeling, just knowing it's there. And when we do a private test with Harley Davidson, we don't have our own air fence to bring to the track. So, when you go to a place like Laguna Seca and you don't see air fence, it's kind of an eerie feeling. And I think that goes back to what John was saying about the culture, the safety expectations that bar has been raised, so that there's much more of a focus on what is an entry level, acceptable racetrack. And that's the reason why we don't go to certain racetracks now. And because even with air fence, it's not cool. So it's funny he mentioned Blackhawk Farms, because I tested there on the Harley last year. And for sure, I was like, man, I wish I had a couple sections of air fence just in a couple areas. I could definitely find a little bit more time if I felt I had that kind of parachute to be there. But yeah, I mean, fortunately, I feel fortunate to be racing in this era where we have air fence and airbag suits and, technologies being raised in helmets every year. And, I feel like I'm in a good position where, guys are having longer careers. I for sure would not have as long of a career if it wasn't for air fence and all these different things that have come along in technology.
Absolutely. Awesome. So I know that we're going to have a little bit of the demo coming up for MotoGP weekend, April 8th through the 10th, when you guys come up and show us about the air fence and how it's deployed at COTA. But how can folks help you, with this mission and with, keeping riders safe on the track?
Well, they can donate. It's tax deductible. We're not for profit, 501(c), and they can also go to a Moto America race and they can take a 2-up ride on the back of Chris Ulrich's Superbike, and all the proceeds from that go to the Road Racing World Action Fund. And also, Moto America supports the Road Racing World Action Fund. But anytime some racer does something they're not supposed to and they get a fine, Moto America has been donating those fines to the Road Racing World Action Fund. And the Road Racing World Action Fund is basically run on a volunteer basis. So we don't have executives making a lot of money to run the charity or something like that. It's a labor of love, and between me and Trudy Ulrich, we're basically staffing the thing. So, and Road Racing World Magazine has, over the years, most of the time, subsidized whatever the Road Racing World Action Fund needed. Its offices are in the magazine offices. It doesn't pay any rent. It doesn't pay towards any of the costs of running the thing. So we get the money. We spend the money on getting air fence deployed. Sometimes we spend it on getting some air fence fixed if we have to do that. And of course, there's costs with shipping it and like that. But it's the ratio of donation to actual spending on the point of the whole thing, which is get these soft barriers in place, is pretty high. So they can go to roadracingworld.com, and there's an action fund button on there, and they can click on there and read more about the history of the Road Racing World Action Fund and see who's donated to it and what they've spent. And sometimes people have bets on different internet boards, and the loser has to send us $50 or $100. I mean, it's great. It's good, all in good fun.
Awesome. Good fun, but also for the whole cause of safety. I absolutely love it. I love what you guys are doing, and I appreciate, Kyle, that you are still with us today, totally, to be able to tell your story. I mean, that's amazing. And hopefully a lot of the younger folks out there, are able to benefit from that and also spread awareness on the safety of these fences and on tracks in general. But I want to thank you guys so much for taking some time out today to come out and talk with us about the Road Racing World Action Fund. And did you have anything else to add, either of you?
We'll see you at COTA.
Absolutely.